One second.
Also, do any of y'all have like questions about like our paradigms and all that stuff?
Are we able to see that?
See.
Wait, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't been able to see the paradigms. Is that like, because on tab, I'm not able to see it. Or you know what? Here, it'll just take extra time. I can read it later. Thanks.
But anyways, is everyone ready for neg constructive?
Yeah.
Ready.
Okay, cool. We negate the resolve the United States federal government should substantially increase its investment in HSR. Contention 1 is gentrification. According to CH22, HSR will create an imbalance between cities and their hinterlands. The service areas will improve their status, modernity, and value. The result will be gentrification around the station area, causing displacement of lower income populations and an influx of higher income people. Lynn 20, an empirical study of HSR stations, found that newly launched HSR services have induced both industrial and residential gentrification in the developed station area, resulting in widespread move out in the area surrounding the platform. Evans 22 found that 1 in 7 houses in the US were bought by investment firms, which is a huge spike in comparison to 2020. Since investors can earn more money from selling buildings, real estate dealers have less incentive to improve the buildings. Evans continues that rentals can increase property values based on the housing market in the area, thus creating a cycle of building rising prices that continues until only large and well-financed investors are able to continue. Unfortunately, gentrification is devastating for a large portion of the population. According to Turrentine 18, development is changing the affordability of long-standing communities that working class residents have called home for generations. Chong 17 warns that during gentrification, poor communities are commonly converted to high-end neighborhoods with expensive housing options, which forces original residents to leave the neighborhood through exponentially increasing property prices, coercion, or buyouts. Because of the potential for large profits from converting ordinary living spaces to high-rise or office buildings, unscrupulous landlords have used immoral means to displace low-income residents from rent-controlled areas intentionally. Thus, the impact is twofold. First, displacement and harm to lower-income individuals. Specifically, IDMC 18 explains that displaced people often lose assets when forced to flee their homes and land. They are unable to pursue their former work, leading to unemployment, underemployment, or informal work, and a significant drop in income, leading to reduced access to food and increase in malnutrition. Second, on recession, McKellar 22 from just 6 days ago warns that the housing market is highly volatile and unstable in the status quo, as homebuilder confidence has been taking a nosedive for 8 straight months now. In an NHB release, builder confidence in the market for newly built single-family homes fell 6 points in August to 49, marking the first time since May 2020 that the index fell below the key break-even measure of 50. Even just a policy change towards HSR investment creates a necessary tipping point for a housing market crash. This would be detrimental as the 2009 recession occurred due to the housing market crash. Contention 2 is pandemics. According to the WH22, COVID-19 has been responsible for staggering 14.9 million deaths, $16 trillion of global economic loss, 2.5 million unemployments, and have left adults in 1 in 4 households with children going a day or more without food. Unfortunately, the impacts of the COVID pandemic continue to prevail. According to the New York Times 22, COVID-19 has seen 500 million cases in the last 3 months and claimed nearly 6.5 million lives. Even more devastatingly, COVID-19 is just the beginning of global pandemics. According to Penn 21, the probability of a pandemic with a similar impact to COVID-19 is about 2% any year, meaning there's a 47 to 57% chance of another global pandemic as deadly as COVID in the next 25 years, Glassman 21 calculates, or more deadly. And that probability is only growing, which highlights the need to adjust perceptions of pandemic risk and expectations for preparedness. Outbreaks will occur, it's just a matter of when and where. HSR only increases the negative effects of pandemics. Zoo21 writes, HSR resulted in a 25.4% increase in the average number of daily new confirmed cases, respectively, while their suspensions led to an 18.6% decrease in that number. Transportation networks accelerate the spread of viruses and disease. High-speed rail played an important role in the spread of the virus, and based on data from 6 cities, it was found that HSR connectivity is significantly and positively correlated with the spread of COVID-19, while in contrast, no significant correlation was found between air or road connectivity. Mandel 20 has claimed that the next pandemic would be due to viruses and would be a more deadly pandemic, 100 times worse when it comes, and could produce a fatality rate of 1 in 2. Thus, in order to stop this devastating impact, which is the biggest in the round, you must negate.
Can I call for some evidence?
Yeah.
So can I call for the, like the EV 22 or evidence 22 or whatever? It was like spike in investor thing.
The 1 in 7 houses one? Or
I don't know. It was like evidence 22 or something.
Evans.
Okay.
Evans 22, yeah.
Sure.
And then also, can I get 100 times worse next, like for pandemics?
All right. Yeah. Got you.
And that's it. Yeah. Thank
So
you.
you get the first card. I'll get the second one.
Okay. Just let me know when y'all send it.
All right. I send the second card.
Okay.
My partner's working on the first one right now.
Sounds good. I'll let you know when I'll get it. I'm yet to receive the card. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then just like the other one, please. Yeah. I'll let my partner like know when we get to that second one, and then he can start reading case.
All right. The second or the first card, both of them should be sent now. So as soon as you get it,
Yeah.
both of us are ready for your app constructed.
Cool. All right, I just got it. We're good. Thank you.
All right. So
I'll go
with,
on mute.
yeah, with that, then any judges not ready? Okay. Time will start on first word. ERHSBL affirms contention 1 is an inside job. The current status quo is unsustainable, making a recession inevitable. Drew 22 wrote that Goldman's in-house economists are betting there's a 50% chance of recession in the next 2 years, and Sullivan fears the odds are worse. The chance of recession in sometime in the next 24 months is very high. Luckily, infrastructure investments prevent recession. List 19 warrants that with worldwide economic downturn on the horizon, there are immediate steps lawmakers can take to both buffer against economic slowdown, chief among them massive investments in transportation system. Failure to adequately maintain our transportation network costs American households more than $1,000 each year. Mallet 20 furthers that high-speed rail will create up to 1.16 million jobs annually for the projects, and for every direct job in the railway, jobs are supported in other industries which will create positions for another 4.87 million people. And the impact of not preventing a recession is massive. Firstly is lives. Bradford 13 of the HuffPost finds that as many as 900 million people could fall back into poverty in the event of an economic shock like the Great Recession. This is horrible because what McFall and Slayton 18 find is that compared to a similar person who did not experience a shock or asset poverty, a person who experienced a negative wealth shock had a 50% higher risk of mortality, and a person with asset poverty at the beginning of the period had a 67% higher risk of mortality. Secondly, is international poverty. A 2% reduction in GDP in the United States will plunge millions across the globe into poverty. Indeed, because the US is so economically connected with other countries through trade, or 4 explains that a 1% increase in US growth is correlated with a 1% increase in other countries. And the CFR ultimately concludes that every 1% decline in developing world growth traps an additional 20 million people into poverty. Contention 2 is peace on the peninsula. All polls point to a Trump win in 2024. Greenwood 22 wrote that a new poll found Trump running ahead of Biden, with 46% choosing the former president, and one of the hurdles for Biden remains his sagging approval ratings, that just 40% of voters approve of his job performance. Specifically, Biden has lost the young voters that won in 2020. The Hill wrote that Biden is facing a disaster with young voters. The New York Times poll this week found 94% of Democratic primary voters ages 18 and 29 saying the party should nominate someone other than Biden in 2024. Now, the polls suggest they could abandon him altogether amid frustration with the lack of progress in Washington. However, Food 22 of the Washington Post indicates that with a year to go for the midterms, it is not too late for Democrats to change course. But now is the time to hit the panic button. Biden needs to make some dramatic changes if Democrats are to have any hope of holding on to even one House of Congress and the White House. And HSR is a dramatic change needed and re-energizes his base and leads to a Biden victory in 2024. Client 21 corroborates that Biden is president thanks to the support of young people. And if Biden wants to keep the youngest generation of voters in his corner, he'll need to pay attention. 84% of students support investing more money into high-speed rail as a way of combating climate change. Nearly 60% are Republican students and 93% being Democratic. And the impact of a Trump re-election is a South Korean diplomacy disaster. Alpha 21 explains that Trump had indicated that he will cut up the alliance with South Korea should he win re-election. And Callahan 20 continues that South Korea has continued to make their will clear to their American allies that the lack of credibility in their assurances would force Korean proliferation. And this leads to nuclear war. Suka 21 concludes that South Korean nuclear weapons could make the situation with North Korea much more dangerous. And in the face of South Korean nuclear weapons program, North Korea may be quicker to cross certain escalation thresholds as it seeks escalation dominance. South Korea proliferation could then make conflict more likely at worst and fail to deter it at best. And this inevitably gets other countries in Europe and Russia involved, causing an all-out nuclear war. And even a small nuclear war causes extinction. Star 14 writes that the consequence of even a small nuclear war would include catastrophic disruptions, and the fallout will make most United States and Europe uninhabitable. And of course, the survivors of the nuclear war will be starving to death anyway, and thus we affirm.
All right, we're gonna need some evidence real quick as well.
Okay, I need the rhetoric that Trump will cut off South Korea. I need the 84% of students supporting high-speed rail, including the nuance about Republican versus Democratic. Then
All right.
I need the 55% chance of death from millions of people in poverty. I actually need the number of millions of people being in poverty.
And I'll also take the 1% GDP US leads to 1% increase globally. Let me know when those are set and we can
So,
start cross.
I guess that's both of your impact cards for contention one.
Yeah,
Your internal for
I can
contention,
send it.
and then your impact person.
Okay, what else other than the 2 impact cards?
Okay, so your 2 impact cards for contention one. On contention 2, we needed that 84% of students support HSR and the nuance that like Republicans and Democrats have like a different view.
Okay.
And I need that like the rhetoric that Trump cuts off South Korea.
Satyam, I can like put it because I already have the email like open. Okay. Should be sent. Should be sent.
okay, 1 second. I haven't gotten it yet. All right, we got it. Are you guys ready for cross?
Yep.
All right. The time will start on my first word. Okay, so you guys are linking out to recession on your C1 jobs, right?
Mhm.
So let's just talk about one link here. Do you know why all these analysts are saying that recession is imminent to happen?
I imagine you will tell me in the next few seconds.
Yeah, I will tell you. So what I'm going to tell you right now is the reason that they're saying recession is going to happen is because they're pumping in all this money into infrastructure, right? So how is pumping in another $2 trillion into HSR infrastructure going to solve? It's literally just a turn, and that's what's going to cause this recession to happen even faster, right? So how do you provide any solvency for that?
Actually, with that statement being made,
Yeah,
first of all, is that carded later on that we'll see later? You need to see the card right now. Is that going to come on later?
if you want a card on why recession happens.
We'll see that later, but is
I mean,
that
that's just
carded
kind of
information?
common knowledge, but okay.
Okay, actually, common knowledge. That's a fantastic use of phrasing there. So, common knowledge, right? You mentioned pumping out, but you seem to really specify infrastructure. I would argue, based on what I've read and seen, the current risk of recession comes from partially supply chain, but mostly because the amount of money we pumped in with inflation and we're adding more and more money into the economy, but yet people have not stopped spending, which is really unique to the current situation. Like we're seeing housing prices going up, and yet people are still buying houses, which is really, really unique to the situation. Hence why our interest rates are also going up right now, because the government wants to reduce inflation. This is the real risk that will actually cause any recession. So it's not so much that the government's pumping in money. It's actually the contrary. It's the fact that people are still spending money in order to, I mean, just because it also makes sense because supply chain is not caught up with the recent COVID pandemic. So people are just spending as prices are getting more expensive, interest rates go up, and then we see GDP going down. And that is the cause of recession, and that's the threat of the recession.
Sure.
What investment does is it helps spread out that money more so instead of it being kind of capped into a small area in the private sector where it's just flowing around. That's the analysis.
Okay, yeah, we'll contest later, but you can have a question.
Perfect. Okay, pandemics. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said in Manual 20, right? The next pandemic will potentially be a virus, right? Is that true?
20, yeah.
Right. So viruses tend to be airborne as well. So would you agree that in most close proximity areas will eventually be infected anyway? It's almost inevitable at that point.
Okay,
right?
no, that's the entire point of our card. Our card is telling you that when HSR is the biggest cause of the pandemic, like spreading, and then we use the empirics where we tell you that there's a 25% increase, 18% decrease when we suspend. Then our card literally is telling you, based off the research, that there was not any correlation found with air or road connectivity. So,
well, right, but air and road connectivity can go further than potentially a train stop to train stop.
My point is, if you want me to tell you why it's different, I can tell you that too, because with air connectivity, they require COVID vaccinations or cards which give you
air
a positive
connectivity is much farther. The point I made here was that viruses are closer proximity, which is inevitable. Air connectivity is a far bigger distance.
So you just want to completely, like, without a baseless indict of our statistics based off you.
I'm not going to indict in Crossfire. And
Okay,
no, the
sure.
point we'll get to it the rest of the debate. It's 321 on cross.
Yeah, sure. Ayush, do you need prep?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna take some prep and we will start now.
Okay. How the speech is basically going to go is I'm going to be going down the case. I might talk about some points that were made up in rebuttal or crossfire, I guess, and then I'll be weighing. So let's start at the top of their case, and it'll start on my first word. Okay, so the contention one is recession, and they already say that like recession is going to happen in the status quo, but in reality, that's actually happening because of infrastructure investment in the status quo. We have told you that there's $2 trillion, Biden's $1 trillion investment plan created a hike in interest rates. They're probably going to try and give some analysis, but the fact of the matter is empirically, interest rates have gone up, and thus so has inflation. So whenever we see a high government spending, that money has to come back out. It can't just go in and go nowhere. So if you invest in high-speed rail, we're going to see this chance of recession happening higher. But then they read that HSR creates 1.16 million jobs, which, hold on. Yeah, so they read that it's going to cause 1.16 million jobs, but in reality, when in reality, these jobs are actually not going to happen because in the status quo, we have the lowest unemployment at around like 3%, I'm pretty sure. And anyways, the job market, the reason like unemployment is really low is because people are like not taking up these really low sector jobs that HSR is planning to build. So like construction jobs and things, they don't pay enough for people to
have an actual living. But anyways, they project 1.16 million jobs, and the only empiric that could probably be cited is California, which projected 42,000 jobs created, but only ended up building 6 to 8,000 jobs. So this number is hugely inflated, and we're not going to be actually seeing this. Anyways, their impact on lives has a really convoluted and long link chain. First, they have to confirm that every single one of these million people gets these jobs from HSR, which is already tell you don't. But then there's only a 55% of these people like getting these lives ruined from poverty. So the actual like probability of this happening is super, super low. But then they say this impact on GDP, which only happens if they get their link to jobs. But regardless, the GDP, let's move on. Their contention too was on Peninsula, which they say that Trump is inevitably going to win, which is just not true because first, in the status quo, Biden actually does have good support. This is from this recent abortion repealment like Roe v. Wade. So actually, yes, he does. But anyways, again, look at their link chain. They're saying that first, Biden loses against Trump, which is really, really hard to determine. Then they say that Trump is going to win. Then they say that Trump is going to go on his rhetoric and cut off South Korea, which inevitably Trump has historically not done all of that. But then their impact on South Korea proliferating creates an extinction level impact. Any extinction level impact is going to have a zero probability because no one country is going to risk ending the entire world over one small political dispute. Furthermore, like mutually assured destruction already confirms that like both countries aren't immediately going to go off into war based off of this. But let's look back at recession. So Alpert 22 explains that infrastructure construction projects often take years to start due to implementation lag. Infrastructure spending therefore needs to peak years after a project has started. He furthers that because of this implementation lag, infrastructure projects often can't provide stimulus in a timely manner, which means this recession is going to happen before any of this happens. Or before any of this like boost actually happens. Okay, yeah, we can go on to weighing, I guess. Let's look at our case where we're telling you that gentrification is a very large impact in the round, where we're trying to say that 1 in 7 houses in a gentrified area are bought by investors and are inflating the housing market price in the status quo. This gets worse in high-speed rail because rail is a commodity that people want to be building around. Thus, that increases the price. We actually link into recession better because our impact B tells you that the volatile housing market prices gets way, way worse in the high-speed rail world. But anyways, look at our contention 2, which pandemics, which is actually the largest impact in the round because we're telling you Mandel 20 says a fatal recession could lead to 1 in 2 deaths. We're telling you that COVID in the status quo is happening and still exists, but Penn 21 reads that 2% increase every single year, which means after high-speed rail is affirmed and we see that like these transmission rates are much, much higher than any form of transportation. Remember that those other like cars and planes don't have any correlation, that it gets like a really, really bad pandemic. For those reasons, you must negate.
All right, cool. Yeah, we'll take some prep time. So I'll start prep as soon as I go muted. Okay, that was like a minute of prep. So yeah. It's gonna be down frontlining my case and then going to the opponent's case. So yeah. Then I'll assume everyone's ready. If someone's not ready, let me know. But if not, time will start. Now let's start on econ. Firstly, they say infrastructure is what building a ton of infrastructure was causing a recession. That's not true. Saw team explains it really, really in depth in Crossfire. He explains supply chain is going up, but also like supply chain is really bad, but also housing prices, and people are spending more than they can actually afford right now. That's what's causing the recession. But when we invest in infrastructure, it spreads out the money and allows us to improve like the entirety of the US economy. This is true for a few reasons because it creates 4.87 million jobs. They just say the construction is low sector jobs, but what they ignore in our card and the nuance in it is that it creates jobs where the HSRs go. Because where HSRs go, it literally develops new industries around the rail system, which causes like more tourism, more jobs, and overall just like a better infrastructure like sector. That creates more jobs, solves for a recession. But then on politics, they say a few things. Oh yeah, on politics, they say a few things. Firstly, they say that Biden has other support from other things, so he's like higher than Trump. But A, that's uncarded. But B, we specifically tell you from July 22nd that right now Trump is running ahead in the popularity polls. We give you a specific carded evidence from Ravenwood, which finds that Trump has 46% approval rating and Biden has 40. That means that Trump is going to win right now if we don't do anything. Then on the impact, they pretty much just say that Trump has historically never cut South Korean ties. That's because our card is really specific. It states specifically that if he won a re-election, he would cut the U.S. alliance with South Korea. He literally hasn't won re-election yet, but if he does, that's when he cuts it. Then on extinction, they say just that extinction just never has zero, just always has zero probability. But the problem is these countries don't actually know they're causing extinction. So when South Korea's president preemptively strikes, which is what he's a very hardliner and he's gonna like preemptively strike, that's really bad because it caused a nuclear war. Then they say mutually assured destruction, but the problem is when the US cuts ties with South Korea, North Korea no longer fears mutually assured destruction because there's no nuclear arsenal. That's why South Korea proliferates. They miss the actual nuance of the link. Satyam will explain the link more in summary, but let's go into our opponent side of the flow. Firstly, start on gentrification. This is really problematic because HSR is gentrifying, but highways and other things are way worse. And it's important because they don't actually do the comparative. That's problematic because rail trades off with other forms of displacing infrastructure. As VOC 22 from June writes, then Colorado, investment in rail yards and lines caused the Department of Transportation to cancel highway extension projects because they can only focus on one large project at a time, thus reducing displacement and gentrification from highway projects. The implication is simple. Highways are far less efficient at using space compared to rail. As Clark 20 writes, that while California's high-speed rail project will only displace 62 homes across 3 counties, Dylan 21 explains that a single highway extension project in a similar area displaced 850 families. But regardless of whether high-speed rails are built, the US will always need to expand transportation infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing population. And thus, we argue that expanding high-speed rail is way better because it's less displacing and less gentrifying. This is because it goes through way less neighborhoods, meaning that there's like less neighborhoods to gentrify. But also you delink it again because empirics disprove their link, because what Lin 20 finds is that high-speed rail induced industrial gentrification hasn't been manifested in China. That's because high-speed rails A, take less space than highways and other infrastructure, but B, low-wage industries benefit from high-speed rail services in the forms of revenue, allowing low-income people to increase their salaries and not get priced out in gentrification. At that point, it's empirically true, so we're winning the warrant debate. But let's go to pandemics. We'll concede the uniqueness that the next pandemic is inevitable, but also the next pandemic is also going to be airborne. This means that it's still going to place people in relatively close contact with others, and the virus still ends up spreading with or without HSRs, and it still spreads the same amount. But then we tell you why specifically high-speed rail is going to solve better. This is because what O'Sullivan finds is that high-speed rails help solve the next pandemic by speeding up pandemic response. There's 2 warrants. Firstly, this is because HSRs can serve as mobile hospitals with ventilators and hospital staff, but also the train can reach destinations faster and smoother than a road vehicle and carry more people than the hospital. The impact is saving numerous lives and mitigating the worst of the pandemic, as Element 21 warrants that quicker transportation saves lives in a pandemic, as research in France and empirics in France have shown that HSR was able to save tons of critical condition patients from COVID by bringing them away from crowded hospitals to less crowded ones. But then you can turn it again, because what HSRA 20 finds is that HSRs are so spacious that it allows passengers to sit further apart than in airplanes or even shared private automobiles, which stops the spread. At that point, our evidence is carded, theirs isn't. HSRs are logically way more spacious than all the other things they say.
Okay, are we good to move into cross? Wait, hello?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, sorry about that, Yig. I'll take the first question and my time will start now. Okay, so you say that HSR is more spacious than like airplanes or cars. What's your warranting for that? Like, why?
I mean, a train is really big, right?
I mean, just because it's longer doesn't mean it's more spacious, right? Because it's the exact same as an airplane. And anyways, we already proved that transmission happens more in high-speed rail than any other transportation mode.
Wait, but the problem is you just assert the fact that it's less spacious, but we give you carded evidence from HSR.
You don't actually. You don't tell us evidence of why it's more spacious. You just say that. So it's my assertion versus yours, and you try to say logic your way out of it, but I don't understand that at all.
Wait, like trains are super long, there's numerous compartments, but planes are one big tube and also cars are smaller.
Okay, listen, you're confusing length with width, which I'm not really sure why I have to explain this here, but train like width compared to plane width is pretty much exactly the same. So like you're still going to have like one row of 6 people sitting next to each other on a train or a plane. So
Alright,
there's really no difference in spaciousness here.
Like, okay, first of all, like trains are way longer, but anyways, let's get on to something else.
Okay,
But
yeah,
yeah. But also, yeah, there's also way better ventilation than like a plane.
that isn't necessarily true.
But anyways, I'll take a question now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about pandemics again specifically, right?
Sure.
Let's say that like, so how come, actually, no. So you cite that's 100 times worse card, right?
Yeah, Mandel 20.
Is that with or without HSRs, or is it just the next pandemic will be 100 times worse just by itself?
So it's happening with the next pandemic in general, but
Exactly.
the nuance in this argument is saying that high-speed rail transmits COVID-19 way more than planes or cars would.
Wait, but the problem is if it's already going to be 100 times worse, how much worse does high-speed rail make it? You don't actually tell me.
No. So you're missing the nuance here. So the next pandemic that happens is going to be more severe, which means if you get infected with this disease, you have a 50% chance of living. So that means your only like actual magnifier in this round, or like to like change scalability, is how many people get infected by this disease. And that happens through high-speed rail because we're telling you that high-speed rail infects more people. Does that make sense?
You can have a question. We'll handle it in the summer.
Okay, yeah. So on our contention about gentrification, you say that highways are way worse, right? Is that your argument?
Yes.
Okay, so when you build a train station, where would you usually put it? Like inside a city?
What do you mean? I don't get the
So like, let's say you have a train station, right? And you want people to like get dropped off there, and it's in a big city. Where do you put this? Like inside the city, outside the city? What's going on?
I mean, like you can put like anywhere. I don't have the plans. Like I don't know.
Okay, so just thinking here, you'd probably want your train station to be in the middle of the city so that people can access it more, right?
I mean, that's not necessarily true if it's like a nationwide high-speed rail line, but okay.
I mean, like historically speaking, but anyways, what I'm trying to the point I'm trying to say here is like high-speed rail requires straight lines, which means if you're having a straight line right in the middle of the city, you're going to end up grazing more houses on the ground
Right.
compared to highway.
I mean, our evidence indicates otherwise, but that's time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna take some running prep starting now. That was about 55 seconds of prep. Basically, it's gonna go our case, their case, and then some weighing in between and at the end. Okay, my time will start now. We're going to collapse on our contention to pandemics. We're telling you that COVID's bad and it's not over, and more pandemics are imminent to happen. This goes cleanly flow through as they themselves concede this. And we're telling you empirically, HSR increases the risk of pandemic spreading. And the next pandemic could see 1 in 2 fatalities. HSR is only making this worse. Now, what they put on our case, first of all, of course, they concede our uniqueness, and then they tell you that it's going to be airborne. First of all, this doesn't matter because it doesn't interact with our link at all. And secondly, we have empirics on our side where we're telling you that HSR is what's increasing it. COVID was also like through the same mechanism. So like they don't really have any uniqueness on that argument. Next thing they tell you is that HSR speeds pandemic response. 2 responses on this. First of all, HSR is used for long city transportation, one big city to another, which means people who are needing this healthcare need to go to these hospitals that are in their city, which is short distance. So they're going to use cars anyway. And secondly, with COVID, for example, this is not something that has like a urgency where they need to get to the hospital really fast. So time frame doesn't matter compared to something else like a heart attack. And then on the France example, it's not comparable because France literally has national railway system and universal healthcare. It's so much easier for them to interact with, as in the US, we have a privatized sector for healthcare. So it's not comparable at all. Now let's move on to their case. So the first thing on this entire recession argument that they're making, they just keep telling you that HSR solves for a recession. However, they ignore the Alpert 22 evidence, which finds that infrastructure construction projects take years to start due to implementation lag, spending peak years after project has started. Because of this implementation lag, infrastructure projects can't provide stimulus to solve a recession. Do not let them say their case again and again without addressing the real world or addressing our response, which is literally telling you the reason recessions are happening or because Biden is pouring these trillions of dollars into infrastructure. What do you think is going to happen if we do this again? Now they're saying this is going to create jobs. First of all, they don't respond. Unemployment is at an all-time low. Secondly, HSR is only providing low sector jobs. They don't need low sector jobs. There's already a surplus of these available. The reason no one's taking it is because low sector jobs aren't enough to support a livelihood. Now their contention too, they're saying Trump is ahead with popularity, but they don't respond to our Halpert 22 evidence, which is literally telling you that with the Roe versus Wade thing, which is happening in the status quo, we're seeing an increased support for Biden, which means overall it's growing. And secondly, the entire idea of Trump winning is entirely based off speculation. This assumes that they're going to be another Democrat candidate and Trump would be the Republican candidate anyway. Then they try and say that Trump is going to cut to South Korea. First of all, again, speculation. Secondly, there's no reason why Trump would even do this because the government would and the Congress won't let this happen because it's economically beneficial for the United States to have ties with South Korea. We're not like a dictatorship, but Trump can't just do that. Then they say that countries won't know about the risk of nuclear war. But look at the fact that literally us as high scores know this. How will the most prominent figures in the world not know this? Finally, my partner says mutually assured destruction. They don't respond to this well. No country is going to risk an extinction level impact. So you need to flow that over. And for all these reasons, we proudly negate.
All right. We have like 2 minutes of prep, so we'll take prep. All right, we have like 5 seconds of prep left.
Okay, on the off-time roadmap, I will go over opponent side of case first, extend our own, frontline it, and then do some weighing. That's all right. To anybody who's not ready. Okay. So, time will start on first word. Our opponents collapse on their second contention of pandemics, and essentially both sides do agree that the next pandemic is inevitable. But and both sides also agree that's going to be a virus that will spread airborne. However, what we seem to disagree on is the way we're actually going to solve such an event. Our opponents, both sides admit that close proximity infection rates are going to happen eventually. Our opponents keep arguing the fact that HSR is going to make it worse. Here's the reality of things. It's going to be inevitable in the sense that close range proximity people are going to get infected. What we tell you here is that HSR is better at solving for it long term and preventing it to be worse. We provide the France empiric that HSR actually helps save lives. They tell you that this empiric is not valid because France is trained, they have their own universal systems, and that COVID is not as serious. There's critical care patients. There's still people who would utilize HSR to help get them into the care they need. It still follows through. And they also don't respond to our HSR card that Nathan extended. It's more spacious for travel in closer proximity regions, which means HSR can be used in closely infected areas and ensure those areas that are locked off from the rest of society can still function properly and maintain themselves. So in any sense, we actually provide better solvency with the implementation of HSR in the event of a pandemic. Both sides agree if pandemics are inevitable, HSR can help us get out of it better. Our opponents provide no solvency in that aspect. Now, going on to our side of the flow, we're telling you that a Trump win is bound to be inevitable. They say that the speculation is that the Biden support is growing. However, we tell you that risk of offense, the risk of our eventual impact, which I'll get to, of nuclear extinction is vastly more important. It is substantially more important that we ensure that Biden ends up winning. And the reason why Biden isn't right now is because he's lost the young vote. However, HSR can help solve because the vast majority of young students, as Plan 21 states, supports building HSR to fight climate change. And in doing so, we prevent Trump from being reelected, leading to Trump leading South Korea, which eventually could lead to South Korean proliferation in response to that, which then could cause a nuclear conflict. It is very important that we ensure that nuclear conflict can be avoided at all costs, which is why it's even more important to ensure that Biden does get reelected. But on this, they do make a point on Trump leading South Korea and say that's only speculation. However, 3 points. One, this came directly from Trump himself. Two, right now, the Republican Party is actually growing vastly in popularity, even if our opponents disagree with that. There are statistics, there are polls. Governor DeSantis in Florida is getting a lot more traction. The Republican Party is actually doing really well in all these midterm polls that are coming out right now, which means that Congress and Senate will be more in his favor. But even then, he can always deploy an executive order, which we have to ensure we prevent from ever happening. Then as for mutually assured destruction, if the United States of nuclear bloc were to leave, South Korea could potentially preemptively strike. The current president is really aggressive in terms of preventing a North Korean attack. And even during his campaign, he said it multiple times that he would do a preemptive strike. And he's not followed the role of his predecessors. He's going back to nuclear energy, back to the nuclear program. And he wants to be even more independent from the United States. So if the United States were to leave, there is an incentive for South Korea to potentially go and strike North Korea. But in the end, our argument of extinction prereqs everything. We have to ensure that in order to solve the next pandemic, in order to solve for any future conflicts, we ensure that there's not a risk of any potential nuclear war within the region. And in doing so, that requires us to prevent Trump from being reelected, which means we support HSR to allow Biden to get into office, and we make sure that there isn't a nuclear war or conflict within the global sphere. And for those reasons, we affirm.
Okay, are you guys ready for Grand Cross?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll have first question and I'll start now. So your link on your contention too, right? So this is the main argument you're focusing on here. So your link is basically that Trump's going to cut off ties with South Korea, right? And then your card here, what you're saying is we know it's going to happen because Trump said it. But you're really telling me that there's no political bias. The fact that he's not even president, Trump has said a lot of things. He said before his presidency in the 2016 term that he would build a wall. Did he do that?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
he
they
actually did
started-
build a
wait,
wall
what?
there.
Yeah, they did.
That is
Okay,
true. That
well,
actually proves
I
our
can
point.
give you a lot of other examples. First of all, he did not complete that at all. Secondly, I can give you a lot of things
He
people say.
still
The
started
point
the
is
construction
that
of the wall, like you
Wait,
said.
yeah, it literally got constructed. Like I
And
don't.
the reason why they ended up going through is a different story with the point
okay,
you're making.
but are you not? Are you gonna just sit there and tell me that political figures who are not yet in power don't say things so that they can get elected, and you're just completely trusting what Trump is saying as someone who's not even in power now, and saying that this is our entire link is contingent on what Trump
Think
is
of it like this, though. What I extended multiple times throughout summary, is that the risk of offense. We cannot risk having a potential nuclear conflict in the Korean Peninsula, and if that means that we prevent Trump from being reelected, that is definitely worth it. That's our point. So even if he threatens it grossly, we cannot allow that risk from happening. And do not forget, there are executive orders that he can take as president which will
Executive
bypass
orders
Congress,
can be
bypass.
Wait,
Senate.
but
Executive
also,
orders can be vetoed. So you're telling me
wait,
that
wait.
you're okay. The other
They
misinterpretation
get
that
vetoed
you
after
make-
time.
the
They don't get
misin-
vetoed immediately.
No, I think the misinterpretation you're making here is you think that this is some sort of dictatorship where Trump can just do
Wait.
whatever he wants. Trump can't just like completely just say, hey, even though South Korea is completely economically mutually beneficial, we're gonna just
Wait,
cut off
In
ties.
2001,
Why
we
not?
chose to attack Afghanistan, even though that wasn't actually that popular decision. And we attacked Korea, we attacked Vietnam. We've done things that the vast populace of Americans chose not to support. We've done things that later on Congress and Senate chose to disagree with. This has happened before. So in that sense,
It's not really
it's the-
comparable to compare the US military pulling out of Afghanistan. to
Not pulling out,
Trump
going
cutting
in
off
back to
ties with
2001.
Korea, because
Not
economic
pulling
and
out, going
political
in.
ties are not the same as the military.
Anyways, you guys can have a question.
Satyam, you want one or no?
do you have any?
Yeah, I can take one.
Go for it.
So let's talk about pandemics, right?
Sure.
So your impact, you say this like next virus is going to be like way worse. Like, why is it going to be way worse?
I mean, you can just look at our Manu 20 evidence and see how they go through the link. It's a
Just
little late.
explain it to me. Just explain it to me.
Okay, well, Manual 20 finds that the next like virus is probably going to be through poultry farms, another animal thing. And as we see empirically, these viruses have really been getting worse. So when it comes, it could be 100 times worse. And this is based off his research study and his scientific ability. So like, if you want to just
Wait.
contest the credibility of the card, I mean, I guess it's a bit late, but
I mean, like,
you can
it's
go
fine.
through our card.
Yeah.
and
No,
just-
you're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, I
probably-
think that's time. Do you need prep, Ayush?
Yeah, I'll take prep. I don't think we've used very much, but I'll start running now. All right, can everyone hear me? That was like 48 seconds of prep, if it matters at this point. Okay, I guess people can't hear me. Contention, well, I'll start on our case, then look at their case, and it's gonna be like a holistic view of the round. Starts on my first word. Okay, our contention to pandemics. Both our uniqueness and our link into pandemics have been conceded, which means that there's a 2% increasing chance of pandemics happening in the next 2 years. That's already been conceded, right? Even if we do agree that it's airborne, and they try to bring up this analysis that it's only happening through proximity, which again is not carded, but two, they miss our nuance completely. Zhu 21 tells you that there's a 25.4% transmission rate between high-speed rail, while planes or cars did not have any other correlation. What we're basically telling you, as high-speed rail travels from city to city, we're going to be seeing more number of people affected by a more intense disease. Thus, we actually affect a wider scope than their link. Their link is to their turn addresses like France, comparing it to the United States. And as my partner says, this is just wrong for two reasons. One, France is a nationalized healthcare system with a nationalized rail system. So all of France has to do is go through the government means, whereas we have to deal with the bureaucracy of privatized health industry, privatized train industries that are only funded by the US, and the US government's bureaucracy. It just makes no sense. Then they try to bring up this response that HSR is more spacious, but then ignore our Zhu evidence, which empirically tells you that it has a higher transmission rate. No matter what the analysis that they give you, in the end, our evidence is the only thing left on the table. Flow our contention through as the largest impact in this round. Then look at their contention too, which is nuclear war, which they ignore our Halpert 22 evidence, which says Biden has more popular Trump support than Trump does. And they just keep saying over and over again that Trump is going to win the election off of some popular vote with a 6% difference. It makes no sense. Then they say that Trump is going to cut off South Korea, which off of an executive order, which can be vetoed by 2/3 of the government. Obviously, if they're going to cause a nuclear war and people see these implications, they're not going to do this. But anyways, Korea is not going to be launching any preemptive strikes at all. And it's a 0% probability of their
impact ever happening, because if they risk the destruction of the entire world, it's not going to happen. Therefore, in weighing, we weigh on the severity and the probability of our case happening, because pandemics, we've already confirmed that uniqueness, it's happening already. Thus, for all those reasons, we win. Vote for neg.
All right. Pretty sure we're like out of prep. So it'll just be, I think it'll be opponent's case, and then yeah, it'll be opponent's case, my case, and then we'll go on to some weighing at the end. Cool. Perfect. Then if everyone is ready, time will start now. Start on our opponent's case of pandemics. This case is like pretty much done by now. This is because what they never actually respond to the fact that in France, specifically, empirically, they've saved tons of critical condition patients from COVID because they allowed them to move from crowded hospitals to less crowded ones in other cities with more capacity. That's important because it means that we solve for pandemics better. All they say is that, oh, US is like private healthcare, but also they still have to like help save these people with critical condition. They can't just like let them die. That's not the case in the US. And also that means that we actually, HSRs actually speed up pandemic response. That's on net good. But furthermore, think about this logically. A big long train is like way better and more spacious than any like automobile or plane. If you think about it logically, remember that planes have to be like airtight, trains don't, but also private mobiles are way smaller and HSRs are just bigger than both. This is like empirically true. Also look to France, they had way less COVID cases and they had a way better response than the US. But then let's go to our side of the flow. This is really, really clean and this is where you vote for us. On politics, it's super clean. We say Trump is going to win right now. All they just say, oh, it's like 6%, it's not that much, but it's very, very clear. But also remember what Satya tells you is that as long as we have any risk of marginal offense, you vote for us because extinction is too big of an impact to ignore. At that point, we say high-speed rails is the only way to get Biden to win because 80% of young voters indicate that that causes them to vote for Biden. Insofar as that is true, that gives us clean access to the impact. We say that Trump cuts ties with South Korea. All they say is that no, he's not going to. It's like politicians like promise all these random things, but he literally said that the next time he gets reelected, he's going to cut ties. Also, he has like executive orders. He can't do it. Veto comes after. He can literally cut ties. That causes South Korea to proliferate and preemptively strike, which means that I start a nuclear war. On some weighing, there's no response to the prereq that Satya gives us that way. If we're all dead, we can't actually solve for the next pandemic. So you weigh our argument before theirs. But also remember, the biggest thing is that if we have any risk of offense, we win the round. This is because the magnitude of an extinction event is infinite, meaning it's irreversible. This means even if the probability of it is very low, the product of magnitude and probability is infinite, making the impact infinite. So even if you buy any of their responses, as long as we have any marginal risk of offense, we're winning this round because even the chance of extinction by 1/1000% is so, the magnitude is so massive, nothing else should be considered. It also functions as a prereq. Good round, y'all.
Good round, guys. It was fun.
Good round.
Wait, are judges disclosing?
Yeah. I see a real quick piece of evidence.
Sure.
I think it was from the AF. I want the France with the trains and the better pandemic response from their rail network.
I got you. Do you want me to put it in the email chain?
What did you say?
You want me to put it in the email chain?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I also see the evidence that was like a quote from Trump saying he would like cut ties with South Korea.
Yeah, I got you. So just those two, France and then Trump. Cool. All right, bet.
Wait, I had a question for my opponents. Is that allowed to ask? Or you know what? Well, I'll ask it later, like post round.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, ask it after we disclose.
They should be sent. So let me know if y'all get it or when y'all get it.
Wait, from the neg, can I also see like the Biden support high because of Roe v. Wade?
Oh yeah, the Halper 22 evidence. Yeah, we can get that to you.
All right. I'm comfortable disclosing. I don't know about the other judges though. We only have 5 judges in here, right? Or is
Yeah.
there 10? It says there's 10 on tab.
I think it's 5.
It's 5?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm the last one to submit. So is everyone here, all the competitors?
Yes, we're here.
All right, cool. So it was a 5-0 decision for the AF.
Start because I have to like go. Like I have to
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I ended up voting off of the prereq and the extinction wing. I don't think the neg was enough to actually like kick out of it. Like all y'all say is like willing, pandemics are gonna happen soon. Okay, that's great, but you don't ever interact with the fact that the AF says that you always prefer extinction impacts because if you don't focus on the long term, then you can never actually solve for like the short term, something like that. So like I ended up voting up there because I don't think the neg does enough to like solve for that. But also I kind of like buy the whole like France response that they have to like the pandemics thing. So I feel like that kind of like kicks out of like the neg's offense too. Like the neg doesn't have offense there. And then on the AF's offense, I mean I like agree with like the whole like risk of like offense thing because like that would mean triggering extinction, which leads on to their weighing. So I just end up voting off of the weighing. Okay, cool.
I had a similar reason, but it was a little bit different. So I said that gentrification was a wash on both sides and it didn't really get extended, but I kind of bought the highway turn more than I bought the original neg argument, but it really didn't impact my decision that much since it wasn't extended by other team. But pandemics went to AF on their turn. I think that the neg uniqueness about why HSR is uniquely responsible for worsening the pandemic versus like airplanes is not good enough. The only warrant I heard was like vaccine cards, but it wasn't extended and it wasn't even in case. Plus, trains can require vaccine cards too. So that means that the uniqueness of the argument flows towards the AF because their evidence makes it pretty clear that HSR is like really good for transporting patients. It's like uniquely trains that can do that, which at the end of the day made the weighing on this argument pretty easy. Plus, they have empirical evidence in France, which the only combat towards that was that France has nationalized rail systems in healthcare. But I'm not really sure how this changes things. I mean, the only thing I can think of is like in-network insurance versus like out-of-network. But this argument wasn't really made by neg, and I can't give you the warrant to your response. This means that the offense that app gains in the pandemics is stronger than neg, and because pandemics was neg's only place of offense, I would say it was automatically an AF ballot. I didn't really like the whole politics argument on the AF. I think there was just way too many links. I think that if like they had a solid response to a couple of those links and actually took out your weighing, then it would have been over for you guys, especially because you collapsed on that. But the weighing was fire, like the prereq weighing, and they didn't respond to that really at all. So even if you guys didn't win the turn on the pandemics, I still would have voted because of the weighing. I think that if neg responded to the weighing and actually did like a little bit better of a job responding to like one of like the 7 internal links that y'all had on your C2, I think it would have been a lot closer around. I also think that neg could have extended that the turn they had about injecting more spending into the economy being a bad thing and just like kicking the can of the recession further down the road and making it worse as a good place to garner offense. It's not just the pandemics, because I also thought that was kind of loosely linked. So yeah.
I think it just like came down to the prereq and pandemic turn. Honestly, I didn't really like the Trump and like Biden argument a lot. It like relied on like 7 links being true, but I didn't see any response by neg to the prerequisite weighing. I didn't even see a lot of any weighing at all by neg really through summary and final focus, which is why I voted for AF. Also, I think the pandemic turn by AF also was the reason they got my vote. Like in summary, I see by neg, they're like people will just use cars instead of high-speed rail, but then they just contradict themselves by saying like COVID takes a lot of time compared to heart attacks. So like I don't understand what they meant by that. And I think in like neg's summary, like you guys spent a little too much time responding to their whole jobs argument. I feel like if you guys concentrate on like pandemics and like the Trump stuff, you guys could have easily won. You could have just like responded. They like already conceded that like the jobs would be created near the stations. You could have just like linked gentrification to pushing out people, so those people like affected by gentrification wouldn't even have access to those jobs to help them in the first place. So I think that was just like clean response you could have used instead, just to save time, and then focused on like pandemic stuff and like Trump stuff. But yeah, I just voted off the prereq and pandemic turn.
I guess I'll go next. Yeah, I voted pretty similarly to the rest of the judges, except for a few things. I agree that the neg probably doesn't win pandemics, but I think what they should have done in response to this France stuff, because in second summary, like it's frontline saying that like the US will still they're still gonna have critical care patients and they'll utilize HSR, but then the other side has to say that like since the US healthcare system isn't nationalized, they're not going to actually help these critical care patients. And also, I think another thing they could have done is do some time frame weighing on the front line, because they say that this causes like more bureaucracy since it's like private train industry and private health industries say that like the benefits that the other side that the AF is talking about HSR won't be realized for a while until after these people are dead because of the bureaucracy that happens that like doesn't allow these benefits like happened in France to actually happen. But either way, I don't think this France stuff actually mattered because the neg kind of dropped the stuff about HSRs being more spacious and not being airtight compared to cars and planes, which are way worse for COVID. And that's why we saw in France, who uses HSR a lot, we saw less cases. I think like that was clean drop throughout the rounds, and that like just supercharged the turn. I think another way the AF could have dealt with pandemics was through a Lincoln using their C2O politics. Because if you do negate, and it's true that Trump does win, the pandemic is going to be way worse because Trump will do Republican policies for combating pandemics, which is obviously worse than what Biden would do. So I think that's one method they could have done. Also in gentrification, the turn was clean drop. The AF probably could have gone for it, and if they had some sort of weighing they could do, sure. But I think the extinction prereq probably means the turn doesn't matter. So yeah, on the AF, on politics, I kind of disagree with other judges. I actually like the link on politics. It's really squirrely, but I think the evidence is like good. Like your evidence that you give about the support among young voters being bipartisan, i.e., like both Republican young voters and Democratic young voters like HSR, and that the young vote is key for like the midterms in 2024. I think that evidence seems good and the link is strong. Of course, people aren't going to like what effectively is a politics is sad linking into a random impact. But I personally think y'all executed it pretty well for it being a politics is sad. On like the defense on it, I think the risk of offense does work. Like, I think I would have liked to see more contextualization on like who has support. Like the neg says that Biden has more support right now because Roe v. Wade and people want to like save abortion rights, but then the AF says that like HSR is gonna like risk of offense and like the 6% difference is enough. I think that the AF probably should have frontlined this better, saying that we have this bipartisan support for HSR, both Republicans and Democrats have it, whereas Roe v. Wade is purely partisan, like purely only Democrats support like helping abortion rights. So I think that's the way you should have done for frontline, but I barely bought the risk of offense stuff. The veto, like the executive order stuff as a frontline to the veto is clean dropped throughout the round. So I don't give them that response. And then the extinction prereq is clean dropped. I like the meta weighing over the probability that the net gives me for extinction over probability. And yeah, I just voted on the prereq. Yeah, good job to both teams.
Good round, y'all. Thank you for judging.
Good round. Good luck in finals.
Thank you. Thank you for judging. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, judges.